So here is the final set of things now, what we need to do. So we did all this so that we can use this unit circle as a tool to help us um, figure out some things like this. So let me write some example problems. So you're going to be asked, what is the sine of 30? And you're going to be asked, what is the cosine of 1, let's see, what's a good one, 135? Or you might be asked, what is the sine of pi over 2? Okay, these are all questions that you could be asked. And the unit circle helps us get the answers to them. Okay, so let's see, here's what I mean. So sine of 30, it's like, how do we even start doing this problem? Sine of 30. Well, so what we do is we go to the 30-degree angle. So let's find our 30-degree angle. To remind us, the 30-degree angle is right here. Okay, so we look at the 30-degree angle and we imagine a triangle at the 30-degree angle. And they asked, what is sine? Well, sine is, so let's remind ourselves, SOHCAHTOA. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So sine is, this one is opposite right here, and hypotenuse is 1. Well, what is this height? Well, we knew it's 1/2 because we already talked about that, right? The y value, 1/2. So what is sine? It's going to be opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, 1/2 over 1. What's 1/2 over 1? It's just 1/2. Okay, so turns out when we do these problems, sine, whenever we see sine, because the beauty of this problem is that it's a unit circle, we're just going to look at the opposite over hypotenuse, and what do we know about the hypotenuse every time? It's going to be 1. So whenever we see sine, we're really just looking at the y value, because it's going to be the y value divided by 1, the hypotenuse. And we know anything divided by 1 is just the y value here. So here's what I want you to write and remember. Whenever you see sine, you look at the y value. That's the answer. Okay, what do you think cosine is going to do then? Cosine, you look at the x value. Let's just double check, right? So if I have a cosine triangle for cosine, so here's an angle, and cosine, if you remember, SOHCAH, which is adjacent over hypotenuse, and we said the hypotenuse is always going to be 1. So, and what is the adjacent? This is the x value here, right? So cosine, we know, is the adjacent x over 1. So do you see how cosine really is just the x value? Okay, so you got to remember, sine, you look at the y value, cosine, you look at the x value. And to remind us, tangent is really just, if you haven't learned this yet, tangent is sine over cosine. In other words, y over x. So that's the 3 things that we need to know. Sines have to do with y, cosines have to do with x, tangent has to do with y over x. All right, so let's apply this. Cosine of 135. Cosine of 135. Well, 135 is over here, and we said cosines have to do with the x value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the x value of that coordinate pair, and the answer is negative root 2 over 2. Super cool. So it's like, remember, we didn't know how to calculate these cosines and sines of angles before, But now we have the unit circle, and we can actually figure out the answers to these without a calculator. Very neat. Okay, let's do sine of pi over 2. Sine, let's remind ourselves, sine has to do with which value? Is it x or y? It is the y value. So we look at pi over 2. Pi over 2, if you look at your notes, pi over 2 is actually at the top, pi over 2. And remember, sine has to do with the y value, so that is the answer for that. So sine of pi over 2 is 1. Okay, let's do a tangent problem. So tangent of, let's do like, why don't we do 135? Tangent of 135. Well, 135 we said is over here in the top left, and tangent we just said is y over x. So what's the y value? The y value is root 2 over 2. So I'm going to write that down. Root 2 over 2 is the y value. And then what's the x value? The x value is negative root 2 over 2. Negative root 2 over 2. Right? Because tangent is y over x. All right, so, hey, do you notice that root 2 over 2 and root 2 over 2 are the same number? What do we know if you divide by the same number? Well, that's just a 1, right? So the answer to this is 1, but don't forget that negative. Negative 1. Okay. So let's recap this lesson here. We learned that the unit circle is unit because it has a radius of 1 unit. This circle lives on a graph paper. It's a very small circle right there. We learned that the unit circle has degrees and it has radians. We learned that a full turn on a circle is 360 degrees. A full turn on a circle is also 2 pi radians. And we learned how to find all the coordinate pairs on this circle by remembering our special right triangles here. And so we have the pattern. We know all these are just the corners of the graph, 1, 0, 0, 1, so on. But these in-between ones, we learned that there's a pattern. They all have 2's on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That can help us remember. Once we know one of the quadrants, we can map it to figure out what the other ones are, but just change the negative signs depending on where we're at. Once we have our unit circle, we can use that to figure out these trig functions, where if you have a sine, cosine, or tangent of some angle, whether it's degrees or radians, you just look at the coordinate pair and look at whether it's the y value, the x value, or y over x, and that's how you do it. Okay, let's do one more. How about a cosine problem? So let's do the cosine of 11 pi over 6. So why don't you think about doing this one, pause the video and try this one. Well, the cosine of 11 pi over 6, where is that? 11 pi over 6 is over here. 11 pi over 6. And cosine is the x value, the cosine. So the answer is square root of 3 over 2. Really cool. All right, I have a challenge problem for you. What if I said, what is the cosine of an angle? So I'm not giving the angle this time, but what if the answer is 1/2? What is the answer to the, what would the angle be then? Why don't you think about that for a sec? Well, we know that cosine has to do with x values, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look on the unit circle for all the x values that are 1/2. Where would that be? Where would that be? Well, I see right here and right here. So if I write the angles on here, this is 60 degrees. And what is this one? 270, 300. So then there are two answers. The angle can be either 60 degrees or 300 degrees. They're both correct. All right, and that wraps up this lesson on the unit circle.